February 2023, East Palestine, Ohio. A Norfolk Southern freight measuring close to 1.8 miles from end to end left the rails. 38 cars piled off the track, vinyl chloride went up in flames that lasted for days, and 2,000 people abandoned their homes. Yet nothing about this event was a fluke. It was the visible symptom of a transformation that had been quietly reshaping America's rail network for more than 10 years. Why do freight trains keep growing? Who made that choice? And what unfolds when a 3-mile train stalls in the heart of your community? The train that derailed measured close to double what railroads typically ran a generation earlier, and it was in no way exceptional. Year after year, freight consists across the nation have kept stretching, with some approaching 3 miles. No federal statute caps the length of a freight train. To grasp why they keep growing, you need to understand a philosophy that rebuilt the whole industry from the inside. The story starts with a railroader named E. Hunter Harrison and a concept he brought to Illinois Central in 1993. Harrison had spent his entire career on the rails, climbing from the bottom rung, and he was convinced the business had its priorities backward. The traditional approach revolved around classification yards. Freight cars were sorted by destination, assembled into complete trains, and sent out once everything was ready. The method had served the industry for generations, but it was slow and expensive. Cars idled in yards for days awaiting sorting, while locomotives consumed fuel without moving anything. Harrison's answer was to invert the whole model. Rather than holding trains until they filled, he wanted cars rolling on fixed timetables, collected and set out en route. His name for it: precision scheduled railroading. On paper, the idea was straightforward. Operate fewer trains, but make each one longer and work it harder. Shrink the hours cars spend parked in yards. Trim the locomotives and crews required to haul the same tonnage. Put the timetable first and dispatch freight on a dependable rhythm, rather than waiting for a perfectly built train. A boxcar earning nothing in a yard was, in Harrison's view, the industry's central sin, and everything in his system existed to eliminate it. That single word, precision, would remake the business. The ultimate target was the operating ratio, the share of revenue a railroad burns on running itself. Wall Street embraced the metric with enthusiasm. A lower ratio translated into fatter margins, and fatter margins pushed share prices higher. Whether anyone paused to consider the workers, the physical plant, or the towns along the line is another matter. Harrison demonstrated the approach at Illinois Central, then rolled it out across Canadian National after that company absorbed Illinois Central in 1998. His 2012 arrival at Canadian Pacific produced spectacular results. The operating ratio slid from above 81% to roughly 63% within 4 years. Investors paid attention. Activist shareholder Bill Ackman promoted the doctrine loudly, and before long, every Class I railroad on the continent faced pressure to copy it. Harrison's death in December 2017, a mere 8 months into his tenure as chief executive of CSX, changed nothing. The philosophy was already traveling faster than any train he had ever dispatched. By the opening years of the 2020s, 6 of the 7 biggest American freight carriers had adopted some form of precision-scheduled railroading, with Burlington Northern Santa Fe standing as the lone exception. The outcome matched Wall Street's hopes exactly. Across the Class I carriers, operating ratios declined from 73% in 2011 to 62% in 2021, while net revenue rose from about $18 billion to $28 billion over the same stretch. Those figures, however, carried a price that never appeared on an earnings call. From 2011 to 2021, total employment across the Class I freight carriers contracted by roughly 28%, falling from around 159,000 workers to about 115,000. Whole job categories were gutted. The signal maintainers, the carmen responsible for inspecting freight cars, the track gangs who keep the roadbed sound. The very people whose work kept trains safe were the ones informed their jobs no longer existed. Union officials described an industry stripped so bare it could scarcely manage its day-to-day operations, never mind absorb disruptions or demand spikes. One union policy specialist told FreightWaves the carriers could no longer cope with economic shocks or shifting shipping patterns because the cuts had gone too far. The physical network was falling behind as well. Passing sidings, those sections of parallel track that let opposing trains get around each other, were laid out for consists that stayed under a mile. Once trains reached 2 or 3 miles, they physically could not fit into them. Freight movements began tying up single-track corridors for extended periods, and this became one of the central explanations for the chronic delays Amtrak passengers experience on freight-owned lines. Legally, the passenger trains hold priority on those corridors. Practically, when there is no siding anywhere nearby capable of holding a 2-mile freight, that priority means very little, and it is the passengers who absorb the weight. And the trains were not just overwhelming the physical network, they were overwhelming the data used to describe them. 2 Class 1 carriers handed the Government Accountability Office figures, revealing that their average train length had climbed roughly 25% since 2008, hitting averages between 1.2 and 1.4 miles by 2017. And averages hide the extremes. On certain corridors, carriers were dispatching trains well past the 2-mile mark, and one company acknowledged running a 3-mile train twice weekly. Officials in Mount Victory, Ohio, informed federal investigators that a freight nearly 16,000 feet long passed through town every single day, occupying 4 to 5 grade crossings simultaneously in a community that sees 22 freight trains daily. Picture living with that. Why does length translate into risk? The physics involved is simple and merciless. Longer consists generate greater in-train forces, the pushing and pulling between cars that can shear couplers apart, buckle rail, or shove equipment clean off the track. When loaded and empty cars are poorly distributed through a long consist, those forces turn erratic, particularly through curves or on downhill grades. The National Transportation Safety Board identified improper train makeup as a probable cause or contributing factor in several derailments involving longer trains. What makes that conclusion sting is the context. Under the old yard-based system, the workers assembling trains had time to plan the arrangement deliberately. Under precision-scheduled railroading, the constant pressure to keep everything moving does not always allow that margin. Braking presents its own problem. Conventional air brakes function by transmitting a pressure signal down a pipe running the full length of the consist. On a train 2 miles long, that signal can need a minute or more to arrive at the final car, meaning the rear is still shoving forward at track speed while the head end has begun decelerating. No corporate strategy makes that physics disappear. Distributed power, additional locomotives inserted mid-train or at the rear, helps tame these forces, but it introduces complexity of its own, and crews require dedicated training because such a train responds differently depending on which segment is being controlled. Then comes the human dimension. When a 3-mile freight develops a problem out in rural Kansas or the hills of West Virginia, a crew member may face a walk of a mile or more across rough ground just to find the failure. That consumes time, drains energy, and compounds fatigue, all factors the Federal Railroad Administration has flagged as safety concerns. Union officials add that inspection windows have been slashed under precision-scheduled railroading, with certain carriers expecting a car to be checked in as little as 60 seconds. Multiply that across 150 cars, each with wheels, bearings, brake rigging, and couplers that can fail, and the arithmetic offers little comfort. East Palestine turned these abstractions into something no statistic could convey. Norfolk Southern Train 32N pulled out of Madison, Illinois, after dark on February 1, 2023, headed for Conway, Pennsylvania. 151 cars, 3 locomotives, a 3-person crew, 18,000 tons, and 9,300 feet. Employees who knew the train told CBS News that worries about its unusual length and weight had surfaced before it ever crossed into Ohio, and it had already broken down at least once en route. 2 nights into the journey, near East Palestine, the overheating bearing on car 23 finally destroyed its axle. Because of the distance between wayside defect detectors, the crew received no adequate warning to stop in time. The crew threw the train into emergency braking, but the moment had already passed. In June 2024, the National Transportation Safety Board delivered its final report, convening the board meeting inside East Palestine High School. The direct cause was a failed wheel bearing, but the investigation opened wider questions: whether detection systems are adequate for trains of this scale, whether crews receive sufficient training for handling long consists, and whether railroads give emergency responders the information they need when hazardous cargo is aboard. The board issued 34 fresh safety recommendations, and Chair Jennifer Homendy summed up the lesson bluntly: the fact that nobody died does not prove the operation was safe. If this kind of story matters to you, take a moment to subscribe. Every week we dig into railroad history and the industry forces shaping it. Yet East Palestine was never only about derailments. It refocused national attention on a burden communities had carried quietly for years: blocked crossings. The United States contains over 200,000 grade crossings, a great many in small towns with few alternate routes, and a stopped or crawling freight can slice a community in two. When that freight runs 2 or 3 miles, it can seal off several crossings at once, occasionally for hours. The toll has been devastating. In Leggett, Texas, a settlement of under 150 residents, a 3-month-old boy named Catwin Franklin stopped breathing in 2021. His mother found him unresponsive, and paramedics needed roughly 30 minutes to reach him. His mother later sued Union Pacific, alleging that a long train sealing the sole road into the neighborhood had held up the ambulance. Tennessee saw a man die during a medical crisis after the ambulance found its route sealed off by a stationary train. Oklahoma recorded a heart attack that turned fatal while first responders idled at a crossing, watching freight cars roll by. How many emergencies across this country have been slowed by trains whose length nobody regulates? The Federal Railroad Administration has run an online portal for citizen reports of crossing blockages since 2019, and in one recent year, it logged over 1,400 reports specifically describing delayed emergency responders. ProPublica documented schoolchildren in Hammond, Indiana, climbing over and squeezing beneath stationary freight cars to reach class because the trains came too often and stretched too long for waiting to be realistic. The industry's answer has never wavered. The Association of American Railroads contends that longer trains burn less fuel per ton, require fewer total movements, and have coincided with decades of steadily improving safety numbers. By its estimate, capping consists at 7,500 feet, as certain states have proposed, could push freight rail fuel consumption up by around 13%. The carriers insist safety has strengthened dramatically, even as trains lengthened, and that any state-imposed cap would run afoul of interstate commerce law, since freight moving between states has been federal territory for as long as the Republic has regulated commerce. Some of those arguments rest on genuine facts. Fewer trains on the network does mean fewer total opportunities for something to derail. Fuel economy genuinely improves when each locomotive hauls more tonnage, and the overall accident rate has been declining for 2 decades. But can a falling accident rate settle the question when the trains involved in each accident have grown so dramatically? Critics argue the aggregate numbers conceal the real picture. A 2024 study in the journal Risk Analysis examined how train length relates to derailment risk, and concluded the truth is messier than either camp admits. Even if long trains derail at rates comparable to short ones, the wrecks they produce tend to be worse, involving more cars, more hazardous cargo, and longer cleanups. And the broad safety improvement over time cannot be read as proof that length has no effect, because too many other variables shifted at the same time. More than 7 states have introduced bills setting maximum freight train lengths, generally between 1.4 miles and 1.6 miles. The Railway Safety Act, which reached the Senate in 2023 and returned in 2025, contains provisions on length, crew size, inspection standards, and blocked crossings. Not one of these measures has passed into law. The freight lobby has fought them vigorously, and whether states even possess the authority to regulate length, given federal preemption over interstate commerce, remains an open legal question. In 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court asked the federal government for its views on whether states can enforce blocked crossing statutes at all, a signal that the courtroom fight is far from finished. In 2024, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine released a congressionally mandated report on long freight trains, carrying the subtitle, "Ensuring Safe Operations, Mitigating Adverse Impacts." Across 138 pages, the study analyzed braking behavior, distributed power, crew preparation, the dynamics at work inside long consists, the burden on grade crossings, and the consequences for Amtrak service. Among its conclusions, the committee pressed federal rail regulators to overhaul the risk reduction program requirements, forcing carriers to account for major operational changes, growth in train length explicitly among them, in a thorough and transparent way. The agency itself has spent years examining longer trains, publishing safety advisories, and auditing Class 1 training programs. Yet it has declined to recommend any cap. As things stand, no rule at the federal level caps the length of a freight train. What emerges from all of this is a tension woven through the whole American railroad story. These are private firms owning their own track, paying for its upkeep, and competing against trucks, barges, and pipelines. Every financial incentive they face points toward hauling the maximum amount of freight with the minimum amount of resources. And longer trains are the natural, almost inevitable product of that logic. Nobody at a railroad set out to endanger a town. They set out to satisfy a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet rewarded length. Yet those same trains pass through more than 200,000 public crossings, through residential streets and school zones, past hospitals and firehouses. Their manifests mix vinyl chloride, crude oil, and anhydrous ammonia with grain and consumer electronics, ordinary cargo and catastrophic cargo coupled into the same consist. The infrastructure beneath them, the sidings, the crossings, the detection systems, was engineered for a different generation of railroading, one built around shorter consists and far more room for mistakes. The railroads assembled the backbone of the American economy, and, to this day, they haul 40% of the nation's freight. The people who crew those trains, inspect those cars, and maintain that track understand better than anyone what has changed and what the change has cost. In the end, the debate over train length is really a debate over what we demand from the systems everyone relies on, and whether speed and safety can genuinely coexist on the same rails. Something to consider the next time you sit at a crossing, watching the cars roll past without end.